Okay. You ready? Okay, so couple prefaces here, okay? So number one, not to oversell this, but this is a life-changing idea. This has forever changed my Rosh Hashanah experience because it's given me a framework to like think about the Yom Hadin in. And so it's not complete, but I think it's a good framework, and the essence is the framework, not the particulars, okay? That's preface number one. Preface number two, I mentioned this already, but I'm saying it for the recording, is usually I don't have like the source sheets in English, but I'm going to be giving this shiur to an audience that needs it in English, or that might need it in English. And also, the Abravanel is going to be talking about a lot of Aristotelian science, and I feel like it's so much easier to think through when you have the English. And I am not an Aristotelian scientist, or whatever you called them back then. I'm not a natural philosopher, but I did the best I could in trying to salvage the elements of his, were you joining us?
Yes.
Oh, excellent, good. Did you hear the part about how this is a life-changing shiur?
No.
Okay, yeah.
Never mind, forget it.
Anyway, I was saying that this is a big challenge in learning the Rishonim in general. I don't know why my glasses just started fogging up now. I think it's because I got so excited. It wasn't fogging up like for most of the entire thing.
Yeah, I was actually impressed by that.
Yeah, what happened? I must have shifted somehow. Yeah.
The AC go off or something?
That could be, yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I'm not feeling it, yeah. Is there a way to turn it on? Or is it? Yeah, sure, that would be good, because it was also really, it felt nice. We'll wait for Yaakov. I'll pause this. Okay, anyway, I was saying, one of the difficulties of learning the Rishonim is when they rely on Aristotelian physics, you have to ask yourself, is the idea that they base this on invalid, or can we salvage it by like we did just now in Metzudas David? Like, even though his understanding of how the sun works is not in line with like our understanding, his point still stood. Like, we can get what he's saying, you know? So this is an attempt on my part to do that with the Abravanel, and this is my attempt. If you talk to an Aristotle scholar, he'll probably say that I'm doing this all wrong, but you'll be the judge about whether this is still a valuable idea, okay? And whether my salvaging job is good. Okay, so if you ask the average Jew what happens on Rosh Hashanah, they're going to say, God judges everyone, right? But what's the problem with that from Torah Shevichlav? It doesn't say it, right? So let's look at the first psukim here. So in Vayikra, in Emor, Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lemor, daber el bnei Yisrael lemor, speak to the children of Israel, saying, B'chodesh hashavi be'echad lachodesh yeh lechem shabbason. On the 7th month, on the 1st of the month, it should be for you a cessation, a resting. Zichrun Truah Mikra Kodesh, a remembrance of the crying or the wailing or the whatever, the Truah, a holy convocation. I don't know. Is that fair? Yeah? Okay. Okay. Kol Melechas Avodah Asu v'yikrafim Ishe Lashem. Any Melechas Avodah, whatever, however you want to translate that, you shouldn't do, and you should offer a fire offering to Hashem. So, I didn't put all the Moadim here, but compared to all the other Moadim, this is the sparsest treatment out of any of them. Pesach, you at least have it's true you don't have as many mitzvos here, but like the other Moadim, like say like Yom Kippurim has, like L'chaper, and like Sukkot has, L'man Yedu Doroseichem, and like, I think it has Simcha also in Emor. I'm trying to remember. This is just like, if this is all you had to go on for Rosh Hashanah, like you didn't know anything else about Rosh Hashanah, it's just so sparse. Like, what is it?
There's also the Yom Teruah also.
Right. But this is like, I think it's generally a consensus that like the Ikar presentation of the Moadim is in like Emor.
Okay.
Right? So like when we want to look up where all the festivals are talked about and what is done on them, So, but then in terms of the main question I have here is like, we make a big deal about Yom Hadin, the fact that we're judged, but it doesn't say anything like that in the Psukim. Okay, so that's like question number one. All right, so where do we know there's Yom Hadin from? Torah Sheba'al Peh, which is the next source. Okay, right? So this is a Mishnah in Rosh Hashanah. Barba Prakim Ha'olam Nidon, the world is judged during 4 periods of time. But Pesach al Tavua, on Pesach it's judged for grain. Ba'ateres al Peros Ha'ilan, and on Shavuos it's judged for fruits of the tree. Rosh Hashanah Kol Bai Olam Ovrin Lefanav Kibnei Maron. And on Rosh Hashanah, all of the inhabitants of the world pass before him like sheep, pass before God like sheep. Shnemar, as it says, Hayotzer Yachalibam Hamevin Ol Kol Maseim. He forms their hearts together, and he understands all of their actions. Uvachag Nidon El Hamayim, and on Sukkot, then they're judged on water. Okay, so everyone's judged on Rosh Hashanah, and it's implied that it's a general judgment because it doesn't specify what it's for. Okay, so that's Rosh Hashanah judgment.
Does that include the Mayim and the Pharisee?
So that's the big question, or that's one of the big questions here, right? Is that isn't part of your judgment going to be like involving those other things? So like, how does this relate to that? That actually is in the Abravanel, but not the part that I translated. He tries to take that up. So skim through the 12 pages or whatever and see if you're interested. Yeah. Okay. So then the Rambam on this just acknowledges the difficulty. He says, "V'inyano shemechashvin al bnei adam v'danin alehem bebrius uv'chalayim v'hamavis v'chayim v'zelas minyane ha'adam." So what does it mean that they're judged? It means that they calculate regarding human beings. The they, we're not sure yet. Okay. I thought God was one, but and judge them regarding health and sickness, death and life, and other matters that pertain to man. Okay, and then he throws out this teaser. V'hanigla mizeh hamamar mavur. The evident meaning is clear, as evident meanings tend to be. Okay, right? No, the open meaning is clear, as a kasher tira, as you see or as you will see. But the hidden meaning is very difficult without a doubt. And he doesn't even give us a bone. He doesn't give us a hint. Just there's a hidden meaning and it's very difficult. Okay? Yeah. So we're going to try to figure out that hidden meaning. Okay? Okay. So let's dive right into the Abravanel. Okay? And this is buckle your seatbelt here. Okay? Because this is going to throw things on its head. All right. I mean, if we had more time, I would say, like, what's your understanding of Yom Hadin? But I feel like that's a rabbit hole that, like, we could go down a lot and, like, end the whole discussion about everything. So I think it's better to start with the Abravanel and then branch outwards. So here's what he said. He says, I've already explained in Parshas Bo, in Parshas HaChodesh, that Rosh Chodesh Tishrei is the beginning of the year and its true starting point based on the nature of the physical universe, based on the motion of the sun, the moon, and the celestial sphere of the constellations. Reactions?
Tomorrow.
It is?
That was in the summer spirit, no?
Oh, so this is saying something different. So this is saying, and I don't know what I mean when I'm going to say this, okay, but that there are cycles in nature, and this is the beginning of the cycle.
Well, I mean, there's 12 cycles, though. So.
Right. So one of his premises here seems to be that there is such a thing as an objective beginning of the cycle, whereas what we would say, I mean, I think the way we view it is like a circle's a circle or a cycle's a cycle. Like there's no starting point of a cycle, right? In terms of like orbits of like celestial.
That's Ha'olam Nivra is like the start point.
So Ha'olam Nivra would be a starting point, right? You're talking about like the first creation of like the.
Yeah. Well, once you now have the cycles,
yeah,
then whatever cycle it's in when it was started is the objective first. Then.
But isn't time just going forward?
Bad just starts somewhere.
Yeah. Well, it did start somewhere, right? But like, in what? You mean you're saying like? I mean like, the universe was created.
Yeah.
Stuff went out. And then became planets and stuff, and then things started orbiting things.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So that's what I'm saying is like there's no, in terms of our solar system or our Earth and our sun, there's no like start of.
No, I mean, you're saying phenomenologically.
Yeah,
What do
phenomenologically.
you mean, isn't there? So now it starts cycling, like you were about to say.
Well, it was a gradual. It's not like
Yeah. Well, let me read on, and you'll see how seriously he takes this idea. And the question is there a corollary in our system, according to our understanding? I think there is, but I don't think it fits cleanly into what he's saying. So he goes on and he says like this: the starting point of any phenomenon provides us with indications about the future occurrences, which pertain to that phenomenon, based on the celestial circumstances at the initial time. So in other words, the way stuff is set up at the very beginning, will indicate what is going to happen later on. Okay?
Meaning, like, if you look at the
For example, just as the celestial circumstances at the time of a person's birth will indicate all of the future occurrences of his life, yeah, so too the celestial circumstances at the starting point of Rosh Hashanah will indicate all the chance occurrences of that year.
So that can't be with the Rambam's secret, because he doesn't hold that.
Well, let's see. Okay, so you see what I mean by he takes this very seriously, right? That everything. So here I'll give an analogy. You know what a Rube Goldberg device is?
No.
So Rube Goldberg, it's a genre of YouTube video now, but like
where something hits a thing,
yeah, something hits a thing and then the ball rolls down and it hits another thing, and So if you look at the setup of it at the start, you could predict everything that's going to happen, right? It's deterministic in that way. So he's kind of viewing it as though all of the events on Earth at the beginning of the cycle, it's like that Rube Goldberg device at the beginning, and you could predict everything that's going to happen, and it sets up everything that happens for the rest of the cycle. Okay.
So you're saying you want to is a natural kind of.
Oh, hold on. We'll get there. We'll get there. Yeah. In just a little while. This is true with regards to the occurrences which pertain to the world as a whole, including satiety and famine, health and sickness, death and life, war and peace, and similarly for all other things which pertain to the world as a whole. This is also true with regard to each and every country within the inhabited world, in accordance with, good thing I caught it now, in accordance with its circumstances and in accordance with the position of the heavens at the time of the emergence of that country. Okay, I'm seeing that it says John Logan raised his hand. I'm not going to be able to see that all the time, so you can just interrupt me.
Okay, fine. But I figured you could see it now. But the question I had was, what about, per se, the cycle that made him decide that now was, per se, the beginning? He seems to have locked on to the idea that now it's the beginning.
Yeah, so that's something that he says he explained in Parshas Bo, and I guess he had some astronomical reason for believing that Tishrei is the beginning of the cycle. So we're just taking that as his premise right now, that Tishrei is the beginning. So I guess the premises are like this. Well, actually, let me finish the paragraph and then I'll circle back. This is true with regards to the particulars of each and every person in accordance with the circumstances of his birth, i.e. this one will die, this one will live, this one will profit, this one will lose, and likewise with all similar chance occurrences. So 3 premises. Premise number 1 is the beginning, is that there is an objective beginning of the cycle, which is Tishrei. Okay. Premise number 2, the circumstances at the beginning indicate all of the events that are going to happen throughout the cycle. And and premise number 3 is this is true on 3 levels: the world as a whole, countries, and people. Yeah.
What happens in the theater?
Right. Okay, good. That's one big problem. So you kind of all implicitly like your unease was an articulation of another question, which is like, what's this? All this with astrology and like things being faded from the start, right? Okay, so we got that problem, and then we have the Bechira, which would seem to be both would present problems for this framework. Because if you say I'm going to be sick, so what if I choose to like, prevent the illness by like taking care of myself, or whatever.
Matt?
Yeah.
Didn't he just say that this is only true with regards to the world as a whole?
No, the world as a whole and country and every individual. Right? This is true. The last sentence is about every individual. This is also true of the particulars of each and every person in accordance with the circumstances of his birth. This one will die, this one will live, this one will profit, this one will lose. Yeah, Ezra?
Is he saying that, like, because of the time of someone's birth, that you know what's going to happen? Or
Yeah.
at that time, you already know?
Say the 2 options again?
Meaning, like, is like a horoscopal idea of, like, because this person's a Leo, like, this is going to happen to them? Or they're born right now and, like, you can see at that point, like the causal.
I think the second way, like that based on where the earth was at the time of their birth and where they were on the earth, then like if you understood all of the forces at play, then you could predict where things are going to go.
Okay.
Yeah. Like in other words, even his framework of astrology here is not a mystical one, right? It's astronomical, right? Okay. So then he says what you anticipated, and this is the first big move, okay? Since Rosh Chodesh Tishrei is the true beginning of the year, which actually indicates and determines all of the chance occurrences for the upcoming year. For this reason, it is called Yom Hadin v'Hamishpat, the day of judgment and justice. For it indicates what will be and indicates the decree that is decreed from heaven for all chance occurrences of that year, good and bad, for the world as a whole, and for each and every country, and for each and every person. So say it the way you said it again.
It's a natural.
Yom Hadin is a natural phenomenon. Okay. Which explains, by the way, I'm not saying that the Rambam holds like this, but the joke I made earlier about I thought that there was only one God. I mean, there is only one God, but they calculate and determine what happens to a person fits in with this, because he's saying that what's the they? It's all of the forces and heavenly thingies that were in play at the time.
Even if it wasn't natural, wouldn't that be the idea that like the hashgacha force?
Yeah, you can still read it in other ways like that. Yeah, right. But to me, this is a chiddush that Yom Hadin is not God judging us like in the way that we usually think. It's that judgment goes out because of the circumstances in the world at the beginning of Tishrei.
Question?
Say again?
But then what's the point of prayer?
Okay, good. So that's going to be his next step.
Wouldn't
Yeah.
that factor into the?
Okay, that's going to be his next step. Okay, good. Someone have a question here? Yeah.
Is he really saying there's something different about the beginning of the cycle that specifically then you could look at the reality and see the future, or like anytime if you looked at all the circumstances?
He's saying that there's something, some objective quality of Tishrei, of Rosh Chodesh Tishrei, that actually kicks things off. We would say, like, the closest thing we would say is like really at all times, like, if you hold by, that the forces of the laws of nature like are deterministic in a certain sense, then like there's nothing difference between the 1st of Tishrei and the 1st of October, right? Like, causes are going, yeah. Okay, was there another question? Okay, so then the question that was raised here was, well, what about tshuva, tefillah, tzedakah, all that stuff, right? Okay, so first he gives a nice little shot of zichronos here. Okay, so he says, and I'm going to read this in the Hebrew because we say this in Hebrew. Yom Teruah lizkor shloshes min hamishpat ha'eleh. So therefore they decreed in the tefillas on the Yom HaTeruah, on Rosh Hashanah, the 3 types of judgment. These 3 types of judgment. Ki keneged mishpat ha'olam bichlalo, corresponding to the judgment of the world as a whole. Tiknu lomar ata zocher maseh olam upukit kol yitzurei kedem. This is the beginning of Zichronos, right? You remember the actions of the world, and you remember all of the things that were formed a long time ago. And regarding each and every country, tiknu v'al hamedinas bo ye'amer ezel ra'av ve'ezel l'sova. I mean, we say ezel l'cherev, ezel whatever, right? So regarding the judgment of countries, it says on the Medinos, you say which one for famine, which one for being satiated. Val hamishpat prati tiknu lomar ubrios bo yupakedu lahaskirim l'chaim l'maves. It says the creations will be remembered to recall them for life and for death. Mi lo nifkad kayom hazeh, who is not remembered on this day. Maseh ish ufkudasov alilos mitzadi gaver. The actions of a person and his maseh ish ufkudaso and his Pikuda, I don't know, his appointments, Va'alil's mitade gaver, and the motives behind his deeds. Yeah. Okay, so that's just a nice shot to remember when you're saying Zichronos, that it's mentioning the 3 levels of judgment. Okay.
Wait, which meaning like
Olam, country, and people. Okay. So then he says it even more explicitly, okay, in this next thing. V'hine hadin hazeh eno kafi ha'hashgacha ha'pratis ha'miuchades mimeno yisbarach. The din is not hashgacha pratis, okay? In case you weren't clear about it. It's not a hashgacha pratis that is unique to those who God loves and who keep his mitzvos. Avalhu kafi ha'hashgacha ha'koleles hamisuderes mehagramim hashemayim asher hi koleles l'nivraim kulam. Can't be any clearer than that, right? It is from hashgacha that is general, that is ordered by the heavenly forces, that applies to all creations. That's the Yom Hadin. Natural.
So it doesn't.
All natural, 100%.
When it says that it's closed.
Yeah.
and then it relates to all creations in a general manner, that means that like it doesn't discern between different
Right. It doesn't differentiate. Yeah. Yeah. The morbid example I like to give is that the laws of gravity don't care whether you drop a phone or a baby, right? It's like it doesn't differentiate. Like the fact that one's a human and one's a inanimate object. Okay.
Wait, does that mean that we're saying that according to this, when it says particulars, it's not saying as like this person versus this person, it's just saying for people generally, it's X.
No, it means. Oh, so this is a good clarification point. So he says it's hashgacha hakoleles. It's general hashgacha, but that general hashgacha determines all the particulars of your life. Meaning, it's not that God is making a specific judgment on you as you and your circumstances. It's that if you were at this point on the globe in Tishrei, at the beginning of Tishrei, so then you'll be subject to these forces, and it will affect all the details of your life. Or if you were born at this time, then it will affect all the details of your life. But it's not through God being mashgiach on your particulars.
And it's not really. How is it like judgment though? Yeah.
So it's judgment in the sense that I would say. How would you say it's judgment? I think we just answered it.
the closest thing.
Yeah. Because it's strictly midas hadin. It's just, this is the law of gravity, and it applies across the board. This is the law of heavenly influences here. It's din in the sense of not that you are. See, I think we think of Yom Hadin as a judge is adjudicating, like is weighing your case and like making a judgment. He's learning Yom Hadin as like you're operating in the world of din, the mishpate hakochavim.
So it doesn't have to do with your actions at all.
It doesn't have to do with your actions at all. Yeah.
Is that usually what din means according to them?
I don't know. I'm not sure. So if we stopped here, then we would all be kofrim. Right? Okay. Yeah. Yeah. So now let's see what he explains. Okay. I think so he goes on to explain the Mishnah. Okay. I forgot there's one more point. Regarding this din and mishpat, Chazal say in the Mishnah, all inhabitants of the world pass before him like sheep. As it is stated, he fashions their heart together. In order to explain that this din is not in accordance with hashgacha, which relates to the entire nation of Israel, the perfected one, Rabbi Yochanan, said about the statement, and all of them are examined by God in one glance, beskira achas. So obviously that's a mashal, because God doesn't see by glancing. So what does that mean? By in one glance, he was referring to that celestial circumstance at the onset of Tishrei, which determines all the affairs of the inhabited world.
Snapshot.
Snapshot, exactly, yeah, right? Is that if you, so here's another mashal that's handy. You can find YouTube videos about this also. When they set up an entire room with the mouse traps and the ping pong balls, right? And then they throw one ping pong ball and it hits it and then it snaps and then all of them go. So like if you like snapshotted, the trajectory of that one ping pong ball, and then you could probably work out all the math to like predict where everything is going to go. Like, I mean, if you had a supercomputer or whatever, yeah. Okay, this is the din of Rosh Hashanah, which pertains to every member of the human race. And yeah, that's the other thing also. You've got to remember, it's not just us being judged, it's all human beings, and that also makes sense in this framework, that why would it be a judgment on Klal Yisrael specifically? It's all human beings.
Wouldn't it be all creatures?
So it would be all creatures, but I guess, actually it's a good question. Yeah, why is it not all creatures? Yeah, I don't know. Good question, not sure. Okay, this is the din of Rosh Hashanah, which pertains to all every member of the human race. It is again, he's just underscoring it here. Davar TV. It is a natural phenomenon in existence in accordance with the effects of the celestial world on the terrestrial world. Okay, so that's the point at which if we stopped, we'd all be kofrim. Okay, so then he says this next part, next step. However, there is an additional dimension to this day, which is unique to the Jewish nation alone, by virtue of the fact that it, meaning another typo, that it is not governed by celestial causes. Okay, so meaning that Klal Yisrael is not governed by celestial causes. In the case of other nations and terrestrial entities, everything which is indicated in the world by the celestial causes will be actualized and will necessarily come to be, no more and no less. But with the Jewish nation, this is not the case. Even though the celestial bodies create a potentiality and a predisposition for certain occurrences to befall them, These potentialities are not brought into actuality via the celestial causes, but directly by Hashem, blessed is He, the cause of causes. The affairs and occurrences of the Jewish people, both the good and the bad, are brought about jointly with hashgacha pratis, which negates the celestial causes on many occasions. Okay, so what is he saying here?
Well, he doesn't say hashgacha, but we do have different abilities. No, not abilities. Dispositions, like with regards to this astronomical.
Right. Right. So, but then, what's the difference between what governs our fate and what governs the fate of the rest of the nations? Right. So here it's interwoven with hashgacha pratis from God directly, right? And you look at the Hebrew also. I think I translated it correctly, but nisyachadu mikrehem v'inyanehem mitov adra el hashgacha ha'elokis. So from the Gramim Hashemayim are unified with God's hashgacha. So it's a combo. So other nations are only under the laws of nature, and human beings, not human beings, Jews, we're predisposed by the laws of nature for certain things, but the outcome is ultimately going to be a product of the hashgachic intervention as well. Yeah.
Well, that's generally what we mean when we say hashgacha process, isn't it?
Right.
We don't generally mean hashgacha process. The place is opposite of well.
Exactly. Right. We don't. Yeah.
Question?
Yeah. I think he has to say that though here because he doesn't want you to think that we're just negating everything he said from before. He wants me to realize that it's a double system interface. Yeah, Ezra.
So is he saying that every Jew has hashgacha pratis?
Seemingly so, right? Because unless he's just talking about the nation, right? In other words, it might be.
On the nation, then?
Right. So far, all he said is the Jewish nation. Now, it could be that the individuals in the Jewish nation have hashgacha pratis by virtue of their membership in that nation, or it could just be talking about the nation as a whole. I think he's going to have to say it's the individuals because he's going to go down to all the levels. Yeah. Someone have a question on the Zoom? Okay, so then he goes on. He says, when the Jews do God's will, the celestial causes which indicate that harm would befall them are either completely negated by his hashgacha or are transferred from one subject to another. As it is stated, all the bad maladies of Egypt that you know, he will not put them upon you, but will put them upon all your foes. But when the Jewish people are bad in sin, even though the celestial causes may indicate that good will come to them, they will not merit it, for he who is seated upon the heavens will negate it. So we can have, for example, let's say, for example, the enemies that surround Israel, no, that's a bad example because that involves Bechira. So let's say disease, a pandemic, as it were, right? Which by the laws of nature would plague the Jewish people. So if we merit it, then God would divert it to someone else or find some way to negate it. But if we had good coming to us and we deserved a certain type of punishment, God might interfere with that good. Yeah, Ezra?
How does this work with the Chazal that weight doesn't discern between
Eino malchim ben tzadik l'rasha. Yeah. Kimin shenitna reshus l'mashchis eino malchim ben tzadik l'rasha. So this is a tempting thing. Whenever you're learning about hashgacha pratis, there's a temptation to say, well, how do you reconcile this principle we're learning now with some other principle? I feel like people who know hashgacha can do that, but I'm still learning it. So I can't just reconcile all principles. I just got to focus on what we're learning here. And then eventually, if we go through enough sugyas like this, then we'll be able to tackle those questions. I just don't know. Okay. So then he says this great explanation here. Yeah.
He's saying that God, the hashgacha pratis is that he manipulates the celestial arrangements.
Or at least, he interferes with them or intervenes.
With, specifically with the events on Earth or with the spheres?
I'm not sure, and I think this might have been part that I edited out, because he does talk about the mechanics of this a little bit more in the actual commentary, and I just didn't understand it, and I also sense that it's not salvageable in modern understanding, because he's talking about how the heavenly bodies have intellects and stuff, and that's a Rebbe Zimmer question about it. He ask him what he thinks. Ask him if he thinks that the heavenly bodies have intellects. Maybe he has an idea worked out because he's knowledgeable about actual physics and I'm not. So I don't know. Yeah. Okay, since Rosh Chodesh Tishrei is the Rosh Hashanah, and Rosh Hashanah in the sense of it's the beginning of the cycle, and the Yom Hadin for the entire world, in which the celestial circumstances indicate that everything will happen for the entire year. For this reason, since Hashem desired to make Israel meritorious, he revealed to them that this is the day on which everything is determined and on which the creatures are remembered for life or for death. What was that?
Yes, we've been doing Ramban, and he talks about this.
Oh, nice. Okay, good. I'll have to look at it and see if,
Right.
yeah.
Yes.
see how it complements it. And he and Hashem commanded them to take a stand for their lives and strive to save themselves and to escape from these celestial decrees. And that the only way to do this is to go out to greet God and to supplicate before him and to cling to him and to ask him not to abandon us to these celestial systems, but to take shelter in the cover of his wings, since they are the flock he pastures and the measure of his inheritance. So what's this pshat of Rosh Hashanah then, of like of the Yom Tov of Rosh Hashanah?
Kind of like an inn.
It's an inn, exactly, right? So this is happening no matter what. Everything is being said on this day, but because God favors us and he wants us to have a good din, right, in the sense of like to not be subject to a din that is bad for us, he created a Yom Tov, complete with the mitzvah of shofar and Isser Malacha and the tefillos, which then allow us to make ourselves worthy of the hashgacha pratis that can override the din that we would have ordinarily gotten. Right? Yeah. It's good. It's kind of, this is a bad analogy, but like it's kind of like back when I was a high school teacher, then like sometimes the principal would just show up and just observe class, and like, so obviously like, you quickly like, become aware of things, but then if you know ahead of time that the principal is coming, you can like put on your best show, and so it's kind of like an in that way, Yeah.
So, I forgot what I was going to say.
Okay. This last point is a beautiful pshat of the shofar. Okay. What else is the shofar associated with other than Rosh Hashanah? Sinai, Aim Sisra. Halachically, Yovel.
The crying of the general's mother.
Yeah, the crying of sister's mother. I should have clarified my question about when else halachically do we play it. So it's Yovel, right?
Also, Melchama.
That's the trumpets primarily.
It's shofar
in the middle, but the shofar, the trumpets are the mitzvos hayom. Yeah, shofar cuts out. Okay, so let's check out this great thing. Okay, this is the character of the mitzvah of Yom Teruah, a day of crying through shofar. He commanded us to sound tekiah and teruah in the shofar, which point to the idea of release and freedom. Right, because on Yovel, when you blow shofar, what happens?
Everyone goes free.
Everyone goes free. The slaves go free, and the land goes back to its original owners. So the idea of shofar is an idea of being released from things. And he says, as if to say that Bnei Israel are free from the indications of the celestial systems. Yeah, and in this sense, he is our God, and there is none other. For he taught this as a reliable remedy to escape from the calamities which come about from the celestial arrangements. Therefore, he said, it shall be a Yom Teruah lachem, Yom Teruah liyeh lachem. In other words, this is a special chesed which he did for his nation. Or it means to say that in spite of the fact that the din of Rosh Hashanah encompasses all human beings, nevertheless, the remedy of shofar and tshuva, which saves us from this celestial decree, was uniquely given to Israel. As it is stated, he relates his words to Yaakov, his statutes and his judgments to Israel. He did not do so for any other nation. Such judgments, they know them not. Hallelujah. So just to summarize, first of all, so shofar is essentially, according to him, associated with Yovel. And Yovel is freeing slaves and freeing land from their limiting circumstances. So we are playing shofar to realize that there is a path for us to become free from the dinim that we would have been subject to if we were just a member of the other nations. Yeah.
So the way of becoming free, is that because you're no longer under the decree, or because God like shadows you from the decree?
I think it could be. I think functionally they're the same. That you're
functionally the same, but is he saying that like, the decree is changing?
So it sounds like the decree is not changing. Is that you're either avoiding it or he's intervening to protect you from it somehow? Yeah. Right. Yeah. Let's go back and answer our questions now. Okay. So first of all, there's a point he didn't address, and this bothered me. You mentioned bechira, right?
Yeah.
So that's a problem I have here, which is I think there's two things that make us able to avoid the decrees. One is hashgacha pratis, and the other is bechira, like
You forgot?
even for going, yeah. So I don't understand like why that's not an option to him of like bechira being something that can override the decree. I don't know why he doesn't mention that. That's just a question. I would mention though, just as a side point before we go back to our original questions, do you, according to everything he's saying here, do you think it is true that goyim are just stuck?
No, of course not.
No.
He's,
Right, yeah.
We have the insider trading, but
Right.
they can still play the stock market.
Okay, very good. Yeah, okay, right. To repeat that, we have the insider trading, but they can still play the stock market, meaning we do hold that anyone can receive hashgacha pratis. Case in point, Noach, the Avos, Shem and Aver, so like, it's just that it's much harder for them because they don't have this institution to benefit them. I have a story, a real life story. So I have one of my best friends growing up, like from the time I was in 6th grade, and living elsewhere, we were best friends. And then when I converted to Judaism, we kind of lost track. And then, long story short, he basically found Shev Mitzvot Bnei Noach, and like we had many years of learning together, b'chavrusa every night, and like he learned Hebrew, and like it was really good. So I remember one time we were learning together on Erev Rosh Hashanah, and he made the point to me. He said, like, "You're so lucky," and I said, "Why?" And he said, "Because we were learning Hilchos Tshuva. He was like, we've been learning Hilchos Tshuva for a month, and tomorrow you are going to go into a framework where an entire community is going to be involved in doing tshuva. You're going to have the Isser Malacha. You're going to have tefillos. You're going to have a shofar. You're going to be thinking about these ideas. That's going to kick off a 10-day period where everyone in your community is involved in learning about these ideas and focusing on Malchus Hashem and like doing tshuva. And I am going to go to work and like go grocery shopping, And like even though he had the ideas, like the ideas are not withheld from anybody, but he doesn't have the system that he's immersed in and that he's part of. So like, it's so much harder if you're not Jewish, which is, I think is why he's speaking categorically, like as if they have no option. It's not that every non-Jew has no option. It's just that it's much harder for them because they're not a beneficiary of this entire system. Yeah. Okay. So can we answer the question? This is a great idea. Why isn't it talked about in the Torah Shebechsav? All it says is Yom Teruah Yelachem.
Because it's a natural phenomenon.
Okay.
Doesn't someone says that about Olam Haba.
Yeah, so that is possible, right? Is that the Torah doesn't talk about things that you can learn from outside of Torah, right? Like Olam Haba, like if it's a natural thing. That's definitely an acceptable answer. Yeah, Ezra.
It's because Zichron Teruah, like the whole point of the Teruah, we link Teruah to be like a symbol of freedom. So because we're remembering freedom from the shofar, we remember that we can be free from the Gezerah.
So you're saying that it's like implicit in the fact that it mentioned shofar.
Yeah.
Like if shofar means freedom, that puts up the question, freedom from what? And then that brings to mind the entire human difference. Yeah, that's also possible. Yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah.
When we said it's natural, you meant the first half of this idea?
The Yom HaDin part is natural. Is natural. Yeah. So I have a possible answer, which I don't know if this is good. So I'll use an analogy. Is that, let's say you had a book called How to Survive a Hurricane. Okay, and that was the title of the book. You would not go into the lengthy scientific meteorological explanations of how hurricanes are formed and what they are, unless it had a bearing on how to survive the hurricane. Okay, so here we have Yom Teruah is basically how to survive the Yom Din, or how to like get the best, the best results from it. There's no need for the Torah Shebechsav or the mitzvah to go into what is the Yom HaDin, because it's just it's the scenario in which the Teruah functions. In other words, the point of the psukim is to teach you the mitzvos that have certain benefits that you're going to reap from them. It doesn't need to go into like, let's say, like this is a bad example. Let's say like, one of the ideas of like Sukkos is to, help you to appreciate like the bounty that Hashem gives you and like not take pride in your wealth and not take security in your house. the Torah is not going to go into a whole thing about the psychology of human relationship to wealth, and to your house. Like, it's talking about the sukkah, the tool that it's giving you, So, in other words, if the whole point of the day is the Yom HaDin, then it's a big question about why the Psukim don't talk about it. But according to him, Yom HaDin is just happening no matter what. The point of the day is Teruah and the institution of shofar, So that's why it's relegated to Torah Shabbat Peh to talk about the Yom HaDin aspect of it, not in the Torah B'Ksav. And I think that's what the Rambam means. I mean, I'm not saying the Rambam agrees with this idea, but if he did, that would be what he says, where the nigla is very, very complicated, because understanding all of the physics and astronomy and stuff like that about what produces the Yom HaDin, like, that's very complicated. That's like beyond most people. That's, Ma'aseh Bereshis in some sense. Okay, any questions there? Okay. You can interrupt me if you want.
Yeah.
All right, last question is, can we salvage his idea of there being an objective starting point in Tishrei? Like, everything's kind of dependent on that idea, seemingly, of like every year, like on this day, then like the cycle starts again, and you got to make sure that you do things right.
Again, we're going purely phenomenological, no like something or.
Yeah, phenomenologically, yeah.
I mean, it's only most time the closest thing you get to is this arbitrary idea of the fact that like it's fall and therefore it's the shifting time from like summer to winter, and then if you somehow view winter as like, I guess, sort of like the other beginning part of it, like the after beginning.
Right, but that sounds like an artificial thing. Like, you could say the same thing as like spring is the beginning time because things are growing.
That was my issue with it. That this is very arbitrary right there.
Yeah. What was that, Ezra?
Plus, if John's right, then it would be the solar calendar, not Tishrei.
That's also true, right?
I
Yeah.
did remember a question.
Yeah.
It's related to this. Why, even according to him, what's different about Tishrei? Like, what? If it's
So for that, I mean, if you're really interested in that, look at his on Shemos Yud Beis of like Chodesh Zelacham, because he says he explains it there.
Okay.
So like, and I think I tried it when I first prepared this, and I just gave up. So yeah. So I think you can salvage it, and I actually think, no offense to Abravanel, I think this actually works out better according to our science than his. So scrap the idea of Tishrei being an objective cycle, okay? Instead, think about the fact that Rosh Hashanah is called by Chazal the anniversary of the creation of the world, Hayom Haras Olam, right? So what I want to say is the closest thing we have in our system of science to this deterministic starting point, setting everything in motion, is the creation of the world, is the Big Bang. So in other words, if you wanted to trace everything back to a point where the Rube Goldberg device was like let go, or like the ping pong ball started going, it's the creation of the world. So the way I would say it is that it's not that there's a Yom HaDin objectively on Rosh Hashanah in that sense. It's that the theme of the day is Din, which traces back to Hayom Haras Olam, which we recognize on that day. And then I think all the rest of his idea still works. In other words, there is a reality in the world at all times of a deterministic laws of nature domino effect that's always going on. And that's what determines all the particulars in the world. And the only way to rise above that is through Bechira, which he doesn't mention, and through meriting Hashgacha Pratis to intervene and change the results. So what we do is on Rosh Hashanah, we think about that idea, and we recognize that if we don't do tshuva, so then we are just being judged, then we're just subject to din, and whatever happens, whatever the way that the laws of nature were set up, just take their course. But if we utilize shofar and tefillah and tshuva and all that other stuff, so then we can merit the hashgacha to help us, Now, you can say that this idea is also kafira because, let's put it this way. He's the only one I've ever seen who says that Yom HaDin is not hashgacha pratis, right? So clearly there are others who hold that there is a hashgacha pratis din that goes on Rosh Hashanah, and the Rambam seems to hold that as well. I'm just saying that if you wanted to salvage his idea, then I think that would be the way to do it, is to realize that Rosh Hashanah is the day we focus on the creation of the world, which set up the framework of din. And then God gives us a Yom Tov every year to merit, to escape that through thinking of the ideas of Malchus, Zikronos, and Shofros and all that.
It's really the escape from the Yom Adin.
Yeah.
The Yom Adin itself.
Yes, the escape from the Yom Adin, right? Yeah, and in terms of just to wrap it up, to tie this to our experience. So on Rosh Hashanah, I find this to be very much more moving or motivational than okay. In other words, like this, there's two options. Either on Rosh Hashanah, I can think about the fact that there is a judgment that is going on that I don't understand what's happening, right? Like that's the way we've thought about it up until now, I think. Or I think about his idea, and I think like this. I'm saying in Rosh Hashanah, if I don't do tshuva, if I don't take advantage of the mitzvos and learn and all the stuff that gets me Hashgacha Pratis, I'm just subject to the laws of nature that have been dictating every single detail of my life up until now, you know, like, and that's something I actually can know and think about as a reality, not as a like placeholder of a mysterious idea that I don't understand, you know. And it's just like this thing of like, I'm in the waves of momentum of the laws of nature that are just carrying all physical creations to their ultimate end, you know. And if I want to escape from that, I have to make use of the system of Torah that Hashem gave us and rise above that and transcend that, you know. That I find that to be a much more empowering idea because it's rooted in a reality that I can actually relate to. But to me, that's just me. But either way, it's a good framework, and I love the idea of the shofar being connected to the yovel, you know. Yeah, Ezra.
But is he saying that it's actually not so? Keep thinking that, but
Yeah. Blah 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 blah.
But isn't he saying that it's going on like the Jewish nation as a claw? Like if we do teshuva, then we marry. But like, is he saying it's person by person, or?
I mean, given the fact that he set up the three judgments from before of world, nation, and individual, I think he would say that this also applies to the individual, not just the nation.
Okay.
Yeah. Yep. And so for further reading, if you want to look at either the Abravanel and Bo to understand his Tishrei thing, and then, like I said, there's a lot more that he said here. I don't even know if I finished all of it, like in terms of when I was learning it. Like I just excerpted the first couple pages, but it's a long essay on Rosh Hashanah. So I mean, you're not going to get it here. I'm saying like if you look in the actual Abravanel. Okay.
Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. All right. Let's stop here.
Awesome.
All right. Thanks, guys.
Thank you, guys. Have a good Shabbos.
Thank you.
Have a good Shabbos.